a global crisis that has been 30 or 40 years in the making, courtesy of the failure of governments to properly invest in teachers and to properly invest in education. I want to start off with a quote. It's a quote from a very, very good friend of Education International, a very good friend of teachers around the world, Linda Darling-Hammond. She's one of the leading researchers in teacher policy in the world, Stanford University on the west coast of the US. And Linda said a couple of years ago that if you don't have a good supply of well-prepared teachers, nothing else in education can work. Now, the beauty of this statement is its simplicity. In that very simple statement, she captures it all. If you don't have a good supply of well-prepared teachers, nothing else can work in education. I'd expand that statement just with a few words and say if you don't have a good supply of well-prepared, well-respected, well-remunerated teachers, nothing else can work. Nothing else can work. So as I said, the Go Public Fund Education campaign is that much needed and urgent call for action. A call for action for governments, national governments, along with intergovernmental agencies. By that I mean United Nations agencies, OECD agencies, CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, all intergovernment agencies must take urgent action to invest in teachers and invest in public education. As I said, among the many crises that we face around the world, the most urgent crisis is the global teacher shortage. And indeed, it's a teacher shortage that is greater than one we've ever experienced and beyond anything we have in our living memories. According to UNESCO, the global teacher shortage is 44 million. 44 million additional teachers will be required by the end of this decade, i.e. in 5 years, to guarantee universal basic, primary and secondary education. 44 million. Now that figure doesn't include pre-primary and it doesn't include post-high school in terms of vocational education and higher education. 44 million for primary and secondary education. That is the context in which we're meeting today. The teacher shortage has grown and has deepened in a way that is now at crisis level. At crisis level. To break down the 44 million, so I think it's important to do so, we start off with Sub-Sahara Africa, 15 million in Sub-Sahara Africa. But whilst the problem some decades ago was an Africa problem, the teacher shortage is no longer an Africa problem. It's a global problem. 4.3 million in North Africa and West Asia. 4.5 million in Southeast Asia. 3.3 million in Eastern Asia. 7.8 million in Southern Asia. 4.8 million in Europe and North America. I think you should make a special note there, because I'll come back to that in a minute. 0.3 million Oceania. 0.7 million Central Asia. And 3.2 million Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, why do I say you should make a special point and note with respect to the 4.8 million of Europe and North America? Well, the answer, I'm sure you already know, is because that shortage impacts you. The teacher shortage in the Caribbean in general and Jamaica in particular takes on an added layer of complication that's associated with the brain drain, the luring, the poaching of teachers from your country to serve and service the teacher shortage just north of you and northeast of you in the UK. When we're joined later this morning by colleagues from the UK and North America, you will learn, as I only learnt a little while ago, that on the last available data, public data, in the UK, 2003, it shows that more than 500 Jamaican teachers were lured to the UK 500 in 2023. 500 in 2023. In the US, 791, the last publicly available data. So your teacher shortage is impacted not only because of domestic factors, but extraterritorial global factors, making it even more difficult to handle and manage, and making a global approach to the teacher shortage ever so more important, and hence we're being joined by the UK, the US and Canada this morning. The cause of the teacher shortage is well documented. It's very well documented. It's been driven and fueled by an underinvestment in education, which now sees our teachers around the world being overworked, underpaid and undervalued. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. And it's because of that underinvestment, it's because of the fact that teachers are overworked, underpaid and undervalued, we're seeing a growing exodus of teachers. Now, the exodus is more serious than it's ever been. For example, in many countries, we now face the situation where resignation rates are greater than retirement rates. More people are resigning than are retiring. They're leaving early. Now, this brings with it other complications, because even if governments want to plan to engage in sophisticated workforce planning, and I put it to you, they're not. Governments are not doing the workforce planning that needs to be done. But even if they want to do the sophisticated workforce planning, it's hard to do so when people are resigning at a higher rate than retirement. When people aren't resigning, governments can plan. They know when people will retire. You can plan for that. You can have the discussions with teacher colleges or universities and say, in 4 years' time, the retirement rate's going to be so high, so we need something. They can't do that when resignation rates are so high. But there's another problem. We're losing them in their early years of teaching, in the first 5 years of teaching. We're losing them. They're not hanging around. Gone are the days of the veteran teacher who gave 30 years, 35 years plus service. Gone are those days. But then there's another complication. Young people are not going into teacher education as a career of choice. From my home state in Australia, there's been a 30% reduction in the number of people going into teacher education. But it gets even worse. Of those 30% fewer that go into teacher education, only 50% are graduating. So we're only getting half of the 2/3 that have gone into education. Why? I'll tell you why. Because during the life of their course, their degree, in the last year or two, they go into schools to do practice teaching, the practicum. I don't know if you've got a practicum system here. So they go to do their practicum, and when they see what they see, they say, we're out of here. So we're only getting 50% graduate. You can see from that small description of the situation how difficult and how parlous the situation's become. People are resigning in greater numbers than are retiring. We're losing early career teachers, and we're not getting them into teacher education, compounding the problem. And as a result of the teacher shortage, the consequences are obvious. It's putting added pressure on the teachers who remain, contributing to a downward spiral of an exodus, but worse still, it's denying children, it's denying students, it's denying learners their right to learn, which denies them their future. So at Education International, we're determined to ensure that every learner, no matter where they're located, I don't care if it's a city large or small, I don't care if it's a country large or small, rich or poor, every child, regardless of circumstances, has the right to be taught by a qualified teacher every day, every lesson. That's what's driving us in this campaign. That's what's driving us. And therefore, we must organise at the local level, the national level, the global level, in order to ensure and hold governments account, all governments account, to deliver on what's necessary. And that is the greater investment in education, and by definition, the greater investment in teachers. We've got to hold them account for their failures over 40 years. Those policy settings over 40 years that have brought us to this point. And we've got to turn them around. You know, I've been around a long time. I know I look very young, but I've been around a long time. This is my 4th decade in teacher union movement and many, many years in a leadership role. And I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of all the platitudes. Blah, 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 blah. I'm tired. I'm also sad that yet again we've reached the point of, we've reached the "we told you so" point. You know, many people get joy out of being able to say, "we told you so." I get no joy out of telling politicians, "we told you so." I would much prefer to have been proven wrong. But here we are, "we told you so." We told them 40 years ago, if you continue down the path of cutting budgets, if you continue down the path of austerity, if you continue down the path of denigrating this noble profession, will there not be consequences? And here we are. Well, we told you so, and now we're telling you again. Put in place the policy settings necessary to attract and retain the teachers we need. And the answer is simple. If you want to address the teacher shortage problem, if you want to ensure that we get the teachers we need and the students and the teachers that students deserve, there are 3 simple ingredients: competitive professional salaries, decent working conditions, and job security. It is not rocket science. That requires money. And that's why we say invest in teachers and invest in education. See, in most countries around the world, the teacher salaries bill is about 75% of the total education bill. In some countries it's more. It can be up to 85% in some African countries. But let's say 75% is that average amount. Well, to increase teacher salaries, improve teacher working conditions, and deal with job security, you need to invest more. It can't just happen. And we have examples in countries where they have invested more, where they have introduced better, more competitive salaries, where they have brought back job security. What do I mean by job security? Around the world, we're seeing the phenomenon of teachers being employed on short-term contracts. Only a fraction of the teaching service in some countries is part of a permanent public service workforce. Only a fraction. I'm talking about developed countries. In Italy, 25% of all teachers are on contracts. In Greece, 25% of teachers are on contracts. Employed in June and their employment terminated. Employed in September and their employment terminated in June. No pay for 3 months. No job to come back to. Job security, paying conditions are important. So the Go Public Fund Education campaign is built and designed to support all member organisations. All member organisations that want to get on board, and I tell you what, every day more and more are getting on board because every day the teacher shortage is becoming more and more severe. To build the strength that we need at the local level, to build the strength that we need at the national level, to give us leverage at the global level, to turn the policy settings around. Now, Go Public Fund Education, the campaign was launched in January 2023. But something happened that gave rise to the launch and the design of the campaign. Some 3 or 4 months earlier, in September 2022, at the United Nations in New York, the Secretary General of the United Nations, at a conference called the Transforming Education Summit, came to the realisation he had one of those Linda Darling-Hammond moments. Without a good supply of well-prepared teachers, nothing in education can work. And Antonio Guterres said, we're talking about Teaching Education Summit, Transforming Education Summit, but we don't have the teachers to transform education. And what he did was commission a high-level panel, the United Nations high-level panel on the teaching profession. That was commissioned in September 2022. As soon as he commissioned that panel to investigate the teacher shortages globally and the cause, Education International immediately established Go Public Fund Education to start building the pressure globally to do what needs to be done. 12 months later, in January 2024 last year, something else happened. The United Nations high-level panel delivered its report and its recommendations. And this has changed everything. This report and its recommendations, a copy of which you have in your pouches, these 59 recommendations now form and give us a blueprint for change, a framework for the change needed if we are going to succeed to turn this around. It was chaired by 2 former presidents, one of whom was the former president of Trinidad and Tobago, and many other eminent persons, and Education International was also represented here. 59 recommendations. These recommendations now become our guide. Every night, I read these recommendations, Mark. If you want to quiz me, you can. 35, 36, 37, 38 are my favourites. 44 is pretty good. Number 5 is very important. And 7 and 8 go to financing. But we'll come back to that later, later today. This is important. And you know what these recommendations say in a nutshell? If you want to attract the teachers you need competitive professional salaries, you need decent working conditions, and you need job security. It's all in there. It's all in there. So no longer is this a contestable proposition. We haven't adopted and embraced all the recommendations. And what we're doing now is telling governments, do the same. Do the same. These recommendations, supported by the UN, supported by UNESCO, supported by the International Labour Organization, the ILO, embrace them. Embrace them. And that is what Go Public is. What we need to see at every level and at each national level and at the JTA level is a national plan. This is not separate to the work that you're doing. This is core union business. Teacher salaries, conditions, job security is core union business. Demanding a greater investment in education, demanding a greater investment in teachers is core union business. And as I understand it, later on this year, there's going to be a national election. That gets me excited. That gets me very excited in terms of campaign building and what can and should be done by the union in the context of an election to extract the necessary commitments to address the underlying issues, but more about that later. So, I just want to wrap up to give you a bit of a global feel of where you're located. Now, this slide is not the greatest slide because it's got some little red stars that pop up. Now, those stars need to become a bit bigger because they're not really seen. But I want to show you that where you fit in the world. The first star you'll see there is in Mongolia. I don't know if you can see it. Mongolia between Russia and China. We then go to Indonesia, a bit further south. We then go to Nepal, just north of India. We then go to the Philippines. We then go to Sierra Leone, Cameroon, South Sudan, Eswatini, that's the former Swaziland. We go to Lebanon, Iraq, Morocco, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Guyana, Argentina, Costa Rica, the Pacific, and now I've got to add an extra star, Jamaica. We're present in 15 countries and growing, and the only thing that's keeping us back is the size of the globe. The size of the globe, and finances, but the size of the globe. This is a growing movement. It's an important movement. You know, I've never been more worried about our profession, our noble profession. It's the noblest of all professions. Which other profession is charged with that responsibility of moulding that child into the responsible citizen of the future? But I've never been more worried about our profession and the fragility of our profession. I've never been more worried about public education, quality education for all, and the fragility in the absence of the teachers we need. I've never been more worried. And I certainly don't want to reach the end of my career leaving education with such a teacher shortage. But just as I'm very worried and never been more pessimistic, I'm also optimistic, paradoxically, because I see around the world great people like yourselves ready to take up the challenge and to hold governments to account. To hold governments to account. So with that introduction, I'm going to stop. That is Go Public. That is what it is. It's as simple as Linda Darling-Hammond's statement, if you don't have a good supply of well-prepared teachers, nothing else in education can work. Well, Go Public answers that. Invest in teachers, invest in education. We're sick and tired of the platitudes. Deeds, not words, are what matter. The high school I went to, its motto was Latin, facta non verba, which translates into English, deeds, not words. Everything a politician tells me now is measured against that motto. Deeds, not words. I'm not interested in your words. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because I can tell you this much. We're looking at you. And we're coming after you. Because we will not sit by silently and watch you deny children their futures and what you deny teachers what is rightfully ours. Unapologetically so. Sometimes I've been criticised in this campaign. People say to me, Angelo, you're talking too much about the teachers, the teachers, the teachers, the teachers. Not enough about the students. Really? Really? I'll tell you give you a little analogy. I'll give you an analogy. When you go into an aeroplane and they give you advice, emergency advice, as you're taken off, the cabin crew, in case of an emergency, a mask will fall from a ceiling above you. Pull on the mask and put the mask on yourself first before you attend to children and others needing. That's why we put the teachers first. Because if we don't look after the teachers, if we don't ensure that we have the teachers we need, how can we look after the students? I want to leave you with Education International's strategic plan for the next 4 years. The strategic plan that was endorsed by the Executive Board last November, following on from our World Congress in Argentina last September. The strategic plan says, and I hope I remember it, that Education International will organise to grow and renew our movement, our inclusive representative movement, to ensure that we effectively and impactfully defend and advance the profession. Defend and advance quality education for all. Defend and advance trade union human rights, gender and social justice. Defend and advance peace, democracy and climate justice. The profession comes first, because only if we look after our members, the profession, can we look after education, can we look after human rights, people, can we look after the planet. Profession, public education, people, planet, the 4 Ps. That's our strategic plan. So with those words, I've spoken a bit more than I thought I would. I'm going to stop there. If there's any quick questions, I'm happy to take some quick questions, but I'm conscious also to give you a break because we have to start 11 sharp. We've got people ready to join us from other countries, and I'm told the session will be open to the media as well. So just a heads up in relation to that as well. So I'm going to hand back. I could go on, but I need to give, you don't have to agree with me. But I'll hand back. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. You know we generally do not give politicians, pastors, or principals mics. But because he's from down under, we will oblige. Colleagues all, let us take our health break and we'll be back at 11 sharp. Have a good one. 5 minutes to 11. These people look very healthy. Okay. So in the interim, if you need to take a 5-minute bathroom break, and if there are any questions, would you like to ask questions? He also has a repertoire of cricket. You see, he's from down under. I can tell you about cricket.
I'm worried about your curriculum. I'm very worried. So a month ago with Sister Vern, I was in Guyana. And I'm just mesmerised that I'm in the home country of Clive Lloyd. Before Clive Lloyd, Sir Garfield Sobers. During Clive Lloyd's term as president, as captain, Lance Gibbs, one of the best finger spinners ever. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and I say all of this to the Guyana Teachers Association leadership, they didn't know what I was talking about. They thought I was from a different planet. So yesterday I come here all excited. I'm in the home of Michael Holding. And coincidentally, there was a young bowler on the St. Catherine side, a paceman, Oshie. When I saw him just running up, he was as smooth as Michael Holding, right? Just beautiful. So I'm getting really excited.
Did he take any wickets?
He did.
He did.
At a critical time. The game nearly changed back in favour. St. Catherine's made two very bad mistakes. In about I think it was the 15th over, 2 dropped catches. But not only 2 dropped catches, the first drop catch, there were overthrows. 3 runs. 3 runs, overthrows out of nothing. Out of a drop catch. I think at that point, the game, well.
So in Jamaica,
Yep.
we would indicate that whoever dropped that catch took too many eggs from chicken's nest.
Anyway, that aside, when I was growing up watching cricket, when I was this big, and the West Indies would tour, Clive Lloyd was the captain. Andy Roberts was the lead paceman. Michael Holding was the backup to Andy Roberts. Viv Richards was number 3. Gordon Greenwich was an opener. Desmond Haynes hasn't come on the scene yet. He came in the second at the tour that followed. So Alvin Kalacharran was in the side as a batsman as well. We're talking about the best sporting side ever. The most consecutive wins ever. And a side with principle as well. Because as I've told people, Viv Richards, after Clive left and Viv Richards took over the captaincy, he was an international statesman. He led the boycott against South Africa, apartheid, incredible leadership, political leadership, and in fact it was captured in a documentary called Fire in Babylon. Fire in Babylon, an incredible documentary of that period. So